evening, guys. What a good day. I don't know if you had a good day. I had a good day watching what you guys were doing. Really fun to pop our head in here and see you guys interacting with all those kids this afternoon. What a privilege, first of all, to know the gospel yourself. I don't think we realize half the time how much of a privilege that is, because we live in a country where you guys, it's all over the place, and that's a good thing. You can hear it on the radio, you can hear it on the TV, you can walk into a church, you can go into a bookstore. Now, it doesn't mean everybody's heard it. You found that out this afternoon. But what a privilege that you guys have heard the good news. And then what a privilege to share it with somebody else. Again, take that privilege for granted. And here's the obvious thing, you guys know this. You don't have to just wait till JAM next year to share the gospel with somebody, right? I am quite certain that everybody in this room runs into people who have never heard the gospel regularly in your life. Maybe once a week, maybe, depending on where you go to school, maybe every day. So hey, I don't know. Probably felt pretty good today to have the opportunity to share the gospel with somebody who hasn't heard it. Don't stop doing it now. Good day. Good job, you guys. Anyway, really, I'm amazed to see 400 junior high, whatever you guys' age is, who would come for 2 days to be taught better how to share your faith and then to do it. That's really cool. Yeah. So we started talking last night about our theme, See the Unseen. We talked last night about the first of two topics I wanted to touch on, and that was the unseen people of the world. I think we need eyes like that guy has. Eyes that see the rest of the world the way God sees the rest of the world. If I saw the world the way God sees the world, it would change my life radically. I don't, you guys. I'm the first to admit, I don't see the world the way God sees it. If I did, I'd be doing a lot of things that I'm not doing. I'm sure of that. Jesus said to go and teach all nations. Why did he say to do that? I wonder if it's because the only way that the nations, the peoples of, by the way, that word nations in that verse is not the same word that we think it is in English. If you go back to the original language that verse was written down in, the word that is translated as nations there is a word that means people group. It doesn't mean political nation like a country like the United States. It means all the people groups of the world. And Jesus said, go and make disciples of all of those. Paul says, when he's writing his New Testament epistles, he says, well, how will they believe in him if they've never heard of him? That's a fair question, right? How does a person believe in Jesus, believe in what you shared this afternoon? How could he believe in what Jesus did for him on the cross, or her, if he's never heard it? Can't be done. It's impossible. And how will they hear unless someone tells them? That's another fair question, right? Pretty obvious. And how will someone tell them if they're not sent? What's Paul saying there? The people of the world that are waiting for the gospel can't believe it unless they hear it. They can't hear it unless somebody tells them. And people can't go unless other people send them. That's kind of how missions works. The way I understand my Bible, and I could be wrong, I admit that. I'm sure there's a lot of things I'm wrong about. The way I understand my Bible, the way God lays it out is referring to this whole subject of the unreached people of the world. There's really only two legitimate roles for a Christian to play. Either a goer or a sender. Because it is the primary purpose that we have been left here on earth. We're called his body, you guys. The church is called his body. He's called the head of the body, Jesus is. The head of the body's up there in heaven. The body's down here on earth. What's your body exist for in relation to your head? Think about that for a minute. From here down. From here down kind of exists to carry out what from here up says to do. If from here up says time to go to lunch, from here down kicks in. The legs, the feet, everything kicks in. Gets me where the head says to go. That's kind of an easy thing, kind of an easy illustration to understand, I think. It's all through the scriptures. For the body, he's the head. The head said, "Go therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost." And I think those of us down here who are the body, the little finger, the elbow, the arm, we're supposed to kick in and do what the head said to do. And as I said, he says you can either go or you can send. I would challenge you guys this. If you go through the rest of your life and you're not either a goer or a sender, you have missed the boat. The boat has sailed and you weren't on it. And you're going to get to heaven and stand before the Lord one day and find out that you missed the whole thing. What was this all about? This was about getting the gospel to people who don't have it. Now that might be the person across your street, might be the person sitting across from you at lunch in school. But I'll tell you what. There's a lot of people around the world that don't have anybody in their school that can share the gospel with them, and somebody's got to go tell them. Like I said last night, there's still 1,800 languages without one verse of the Bible. Maybe, like Matt said, somebody in here, maybe bunches of you, will go and be part of a team that reaches one of those. You're not going to do it yourself, you guys. Being a missionary to an unreached people group isn't something you just kind of go off by yourself and do. It's a huge team involved. It's pretty organized. It's not like you just go parachute out into the jungle and learn a language. No, it's really organized, and it's really not as dangerous as you might think it is. Believe me, my wife and I did it, and we are wimps. Okay, and that is not just like false humility. Okay, Cairn University is putting us up in the Sheraton while we're here. We've never stayed in the Sheraton once in our life, till today. Last night. We like the Sheraton a lot better than we like the jungle. If we have a choice, we're taking the Sheraton. Okay? I hate the jungle. I hate it. That isn't even too strong. I hate it. You couldn't pay me enough money to live there. Maybe you could. Maybe if the word starts with a B, billion, I'd consider it. But for anything less than that, forget it. I don't like the jungle. But there's people out there, you guys, that have never heard the gospel. And I'm praying that there are people in this room right now that when we get to heaven, we're going to hear your story about how God used you to reach some unreached people group. Okay, let's change subjects a little bit. We'll stay on our main theme here. We're still talking about seeing the unseen, but let's talk about another one that I think is really critical. If we see the unreached people the way God does, it's going to change our life. If we see eternity the way we're supposed to, that also will change our life. A lot of people go through life. In fact, your culture, the culture that I was raised in and you were raised in, I was raised in the same world for the most part. I know there's some differences, but I'm a central Pennsylvania kid. And my culture taught me, as I was growing up, live for what is around you, live for this life. Get all you can get out of this life, because really this is all you got. Now, my parents didn't teach me that. They were Christians. But the culture around me definitely did. And I don't think it's just the world that sees this incorrectly too. I think a lot of Christians, they kind of live life this way. They know eternity's out there, but that's covered, right? Jesus died for me. I'm going to live with him forever. Eternity's covered. I'm going to live for life here. Because what really does eternity have to do with life here? And what really does life here have to do with eternity? Really, not that much. Oh, I'd say, wait a minute, whoa. Are you reading the same Bible I'm reading? Because if you are, you're missing it. Because the life we live here and now, as Maximus says, you guys know who Maximus is? You know, I put this picture in my PowerPoint and I realized, you know what? Everybody I'm going to be talking to, for most of you, weren't even born when that movie was made. I feel old. That movie was made in 2000, so if you were born after that, it's called Gladiator. Huh? I love that movie. I love the story. I love the history. It's, I don't recommend it, but I love it. Maximus, General Maximus, as his soldiers, the Roman soldiers, are about to attack the enemy, the Germanians or whatever they were, he quoted his Caesar. And this was actually I looked this up. This is a real quote from a real Caesar of Rome. What was his name? Marcus Aurelius. Yeah, that's his name in the movie, but that's also his name in history. There was a real emperor, Marcus Aurelius, and he was known for being a philosopher. And he said that what we do in life echoes in eternity. And Maximus says that to his soldiers as they're about to attack. What we do in life echoes in eternity. In other words, if you die doing what you're about to do, it has ramifications for eternity. Now, I don't usually get my wisdom and insight for life from, movies that Hollywood puts out. But every once in a while, they actually say something that's true. And that's one of them. That's actually a very true statement, right? The scriptures bear that out. Let's look at a couple verses. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 says that we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ. Now, stop there. I want to ask you a question. Who's Paul talking here to? Christians or non-Christians? He's talking to Christians. He's not talking to unsaved people. He's talking about you and me. Did you know that we will stand before the judgment seat of Christ? And you might say, wait a minute, I thought that God already judged my sin on Christ, paid for it, punished Jesus. I'd say, yeah, you're absolutely right. You see, this judgment seat, this is not a judgment for my sin. No, my sin has been judged, been paid for. If I'm a believer in Jesus, already dealt with. What's this judgment have to do with? Well, let's read on. So that each of us may receive what is due us for the things done while in the body. That's why we're living in this, as the Hoti would call it, this hohai, this person shell, this person thing. That's your body. As we're living in this shell, the things that we do in this body, whether good or bad, are going to be judged one day. Is that scary? It could be. It could be. If I live my life for me, I might have some real dread of that day that's coming. I'm not going to be sent eternally separated from God, no. In fact, the scriptures really make it clear what's happening here is the person who lives his life for God and does, in this context, the things that are good, that person is going to be rewarded. And sometimes I think we as Christians, we just don't take that seriously enough. We think it's unspiritual or something to think about rewards. Oh, I don't do anything for rewards. Really? You don't? I do. Well, why does God tell us so much about how he's going to reward those who faithfully serve him if he doesn't want us to kind of see that as a motivation? It doesn't make any sense to me. Those who live their life for themselves, the Bible says, they're going to suffer loss. Paul, same writer in 1 Corinthians, says, if you build a foundation of gold and silver and precious stones, and he's talking about your life of doing things for the Lord instead of yourself, he said that's going to be purified on the day. That's going to be like on the day of judgment, the judgment seat here that we're talking about, that's going to be put to the test, and the fire is going to test it, and it's just going to be made more pure. That's what fire does to gold and silver and precious stones. But if I live my life on a foundation of wood and hay and stubble, Paul says, the fire is just going to burn it up. Gone. I want you to know what he's saying there, because this is no small matter. It's my life he's talking about. It's your life. Not where you spend eternity, not what I'm talking about. Not whether you're saved or lost. If you're a believer in Christ, that's already settled. But the value of your life, what your life comes to in the end. It can either be really valuable and rewarded for eternity, or it can go poof like that. And I'll tell you what the determiner is, you guys, in that, on which it turns out to be. It's who you live in your life for. You live in your life for God, or you live in your life for yourself? That's really what it boils down to. It's one or the other. He also says, Jesus says this, don't lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourself treasures in heaven. What's he talking about? You can live for here and now. You can spend your whole life trying to get money, laying up treasures on this earth so that when you die you leave it to your kids. Or you can spend your life laying up treasures up there in heaven where it can't decay, no one can steal it. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I kind of think of an illustration that I found quite helpful for me. Some of you may have already seen this. Because it isn't original with me. I saw a preacher on the internet use this illustration, and I thought, man, you know what? That's a pretty good illustration. I think I'm going to steal that. And so I'm going to steal it. And can you help me? What's your name? Caleb, can you grab the end of that rope? Just walk right down the middle of the aisle. Let's try to untangle it here. That's probably not what I probably shouldn't have done that. Keep walking. Good, no knots. Wow. Okay, just walk as far as it'll go and then drop it. All right, good. That's good. Right there. Thank you very much, Caleb. So, this rope here that I have in my hand, for the purposes of my illustration, represents my life. And it can represent your life too for the purposes of this illustration. If you notice, if you can see it, there's some tape on my rope here. There's some black tape and then there's some silver tape. And the black tape, we're going to say that represents the part of my life on earth before I retire, up until I retire. The silver tape, if you can see it, that represents the part of my life after I retire. So let's say 65 to 70 years of my life, if I live that long, is black tape. 15 to say 20, 25 years, if I'm really lucky, represents the silver tape. Now, what the world tells me to do, you guys, every day, on TV and everywhere else, is to live my first, the black part, 65 to 70 years, depending on how rich you are and how quick you can retire, to live that with the sole purpose of making enough money so that that silver part can be really fun. And I can go where I want. You know, I can travel the world. I can eat what I want. I can drive the kind of car I want. I can live in the kind of house I want. And that's called like retirement. The American dream, whatever you want to define it as. I've often thought about that, and I've thought, you know, something doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Even if I wasn't a Christian and believed that there's a place you go after you die, the part of this that doesn't make sense to me is I'm supposed to work my whole life really hard so that when I'm too old to enjoy it, and probably too sickly maybe, my dad died of brain cancer at 63, he didn't even make it to retirement. I'm supposed to live my whole life for this little sliver of time that I might not even survive until, and if I do, I'll probably be too old and decrepit to even enjoy it. Where am I going to go? I got a cane, you know. No offense if that's you. I realize 65, 70 is not that old. I realize that now as I get closer to it. But I got a question for you. What's the brown part of the rope? If you're a believer, yes, sir. Yeah. I can't hear very well, sorry. Okay, very good, thank you. Does my life end at the end of the silver tape? A lot of people around you think it does. I don't think it does. God says it doesn't. No, death on this earth for a Christian isn't the end. It's just stepping from one place into the other. We're not going to be some spirit floating around out there. There's going to be a new heaven, a new earth, and we're going to have new bodies. We're going to be like real people. I don't know what you think heaven's going to be like. Do you think we're going to be sitting on clouds playing a harp? You know, with a halo around our head and little white fake wings or something? No, you're going to be a real person with a human-type body, but a perfect body. A new body. The kind of body that God made for Adam and Eve before sin infested it and destroyed it. Yeah. Okay, I'm guessing it's probably not going to be endless cotton candy. Okay, that's why don't you take that up with your group leader? That's a theological discussion I don't want to get into. Okay, so here's my question. Should I, as a Christian, live my black part of my life for the silver part, or should I live it for the brown part? Look how far the brown part goes out there. This is maybe 80 years altogether. What's that? Maybe 100,000. Only here's the kicker. Imagine the rope going right down the middle, right out the door, up the stairs, out, down the hallway, out the door, and it just keeps on going. And it keeps on going all the way around the earth, all the way down to China. And then it sort of gravity, I know it doesn't work this way, gravity would keep it on the earth, but let's just imagine it starts falling off the earth down there at the bottom. And it falls down and it just starts going out into space. And it goes out past our little solar system here, you know, Venus and Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, all the way out past that. And it goes all the way out through the Milky Way, 100,000 light years across the Milky Way, all the way to the edge, keeps going out of the galaxy and on to the next galaxy and across the known universe, 93 billion light years. And then beyond that, wherever, because I don't know where the end of the universe is. Because you know what? There's no end to this rope here. If this is your life, there is no end. You will live forever. For eternity. I know my brain can't even fathom that, and I'm guessing yours can't either. But that's the truth. So do I want to live for this, or do I want to live for this? I'll tell you what I want to live for, you guys. I want to live for this, right here. For what's coming. That's only smart, if you ask me. I think we'll have plenty of time in eternity to travel and see the world. And I don't have to do it when I retire. Let's leave that right there. We might come back to that. I want to introduce you to some people that are some of my heroes. I'll bet you that, well, I don't know, maybe there's somebody in this room that's heard of these people. Maybe you've never heard these names before. I grew up hearing these names, and they were honestly and truly some of my heroes. These guys impacted my life. I never met a one of them. They had a profound impact on the whole direction of my life. Dave Bacon, Bob Dye, Cecil Dye, George Hosbach, and Eldon Hunter. These were a pastor, the guy in the middle, and 4 elders, or 4 leaders, in a church in Michigan. This was back before I was born, a long time before I was born, about 25 years before I was born. A missionary came to their church. His name was Paul Fleming. He was the founder of the mission that my wife and I are part of. And he told this church about the stuff we talked about last night. There's whole language. He had been a missionary in Malaysia, and he got really sick, and he had to come home. And the doctor said, if you go back, you will die. You cannot go back. So he started to go around telling Christians in America, hey, there's people over there. I saw a lot of them who have never heard of Jesus once, and they never will unless somebody goes and learns their language. We got to get more missionaries. Come on. He was a really, dynamic motivator type guy. He came to their church. The pastor had never heard of such a thing. Wait a minute, you're saying there are whole languages of people in the world that have never heard? That's what I'm saying. I've seen them. You know what the pastor said? I'm not making this up. He said, well, if that's true, I'm going. I'm going. And then 4 other of the leaders of his church said, well, if you're going, we're going with you. They lost their pastor and their elder board out the door. Imagine that happening in your church. I run into people from that church to this day, and they still remember that. Yeah, we lost our whole leadership team. They all went to the mission field. They went to a part of the world called Bolivia. It's down in central South America. They heard that there are unreached people groups there that no one has ever shared the gospel with, so they said, well, that's where we're going. Okay, they had come into the mission that we're part of, and they had been trained to go be missionaries, and they were the first 5 missionaries that New Tribes Mission ever sent out. Okay, first 5. They didn't know what they were doing. I mean, they were the first ones to go try it. They got down to Bolivia, and they went to the government office that is in charge of all the indigenous, like the tribal regions of the country, who could go in and who couldn't. And they talked to the government official, and they said, look, we're Christians from America. We would like to go to a people group in your country that's never heard of Jesus and share the gospel with them. Where can we go? And this government official said to them, I know exactly where you guys could go. And he pulled out a map, and he laid it out of Bolivia, and he circled that town that I circled called Roboré. He said, go to Roboré. It's a town on the edge of the jungle. It's the edge of civilization. It's where the jungle begins. He says, there's a people group that lives out in the jungle there that you guys have permission to go reach. Go reach them. Go make good Christians out of them, he said. Because if you do, if you're successful, then we will not do what we have decided we must do as the government of Bolivia. And Cecil Dye, the leader of this team, who was the one talking to the government official, said, well, what were you going to do? And you know what that guy said? He said, we've already made an official government decision that we're going to go in and wipe out the entire people group. We're going to kill them all. Now, in today's world, that's unimaginable, right? I mean, it happens in places, but you don't do that. Well, what in the world? Why would they do that? He said this people group called the Iote people. They're very violent. They're killers. Now, last night I told you the Houthi were said to be violent killers. It was a total rumor. This was not rumor. This was fact. The Iote were killers. They killed everybody who would go into their territory. Now, the part that the government official left out is the reason the Iote would kill anybody who goes into their territory. And you know why they would kill anybody who goes into their territory? Because everybody who went into their territory was going in there to try to kill them. The Bolivian people would shoot the Iote people on sight. They considered them to be subhuman and dangerous, kill them like a bear. Right? And so the Iote would fight back. And they were good fighters. So the government official says to him, yeah, go there. And I'm amazed to this day what one of my heroes, Cecil Dye, said when he heard that. I know what I would have said. I think I'd have said, okay, sir, that's a great idea, but are there like 4 or 5 other options you could give us? You know, that we could pray about? Let us pray about this. Like, give us 2 or 3 that are like nonviolent, and we'll pray about them too. Well, Cecil said, well, okay, that obviously is where God wants us to go. We're going. We're going to kill you. Yeah. What would motivate a guy to do that? He's living for the brown. Here's some words. That's Cecil. He's the leader. He was the pastor of the church. These are excerpts from a letter he wrote back after he got over to Bolivia. I don't believe we care so much whether this expedition is a failure so far as our lives are concerned. But we want God to get the most possible glory from everything that happens. We don't really care whether we live or whether we die. It really only matters that God gets the glory. On the other hand, he says, it seems that it would be a real testimony to the Lord's power to make the expedition successful. So if we go and get killed, so be it, if that's God's will. But wouldn't it be great if we go and we reach them and they become believers? Because that would be, that would be glorifying God too. Yeah, that's pretty good thinking. He goes on to say, oh boy. Thank you very much. I have no idea what, I've never had those kind of problems before, and that's not their fault, it's my computer's fault. Then again, he says, perhaps more Christians at home would be, listen to this. He said, okay, if we die, whatever God wants. If we live, that'd be great. Because maybe, they'd be believers and God would be glorified. But then again, he says, this blows my mind. Perhaps more Christians at home would become more aware of their responsibility to lost men and less concerned over the material things of this life if the expedition failed and we lost our lives. On the other hand, if we get killed, maybe more Christians back home will say, whoa, what were those guys doing down there? They were going to reach people who never heard. Maybe they'd get more serious about it. Maybe they would pray more for the next group who went out to the same tribe. Maybe there would be more all-out volunteers so that every tribe would be reached in our generation. You know what, you guys? There's a guy who's living for eternity. I believe the real attitude of every fellow in this group is that they want, at any cost, that which will glorify God the most. So they went. They went to Robertet. That's kind of what it looks like today. That's what it looked like back then. Sorry, I wasn't supposed to do that. Here they are with their stuff getting ready to go out into the jungle. Notice all the, missionaries used to wear these jungle helmets, pith helmets or something they call them. Yeah, I've never worn one of those, but I always wanted to because I thought that's what missionaries wear. But there they are. They're ready to start going out into the jungle. They had to cut the trails the farther they got out in there. There's Cecil cutting through the jungle. Their strategy was this. Let's cut trails out into the Iowa territory. We know they're out there somewhere. Let's leave gifts on the trail for them. Because you couldn't talk to them, right? They couldn't speak their language. They couldn't go out there and say, listen, Iowa people, we're here friends, we're friendly. They couldn't say that. There was no ability to communicate with them. So they tried to prove it by putting gifts out. And they would leave their pots and their axes and their machetes on the trail. And then they would go back out and wait a while in town. And then they would go back out and check the trails and they'd see, is our stuff gone? For months and months, nothing was taken. And then finally stuff started to disappear. Ooh, they're taking it. So they put more. And then a number of months went on by doing that. And then they started to notice that their stuff was gone and Iode's stuff was left in its place. Ooh, they're giving us gifts in return. This is like friendship. So they said, okay, we're going and we're not coming back until we find them. That's what they told. These are all married guys. They had kids and everything. Told their wives, we're going out there and we're not coming back until we find them. Because they want to be friends. So they did. They went out there and they eventually came upon, this isn't a picture of the actual guys, right? Because this was a long time ago. But those are Iowa people, the way they looked when they were first found. They found them. They found sign of them on the edge of this river, and they stayed there. And eventually some Iowa guys came out, and they started to, trade with them, and it was going really good. Seemed really friendly. And they broke up. The Iowa were going back to their village, and the missionaries were going back to where their camp was. And would you believe it? An Iowa warrior who had missed the whole trading session came running up, and it was too late. The missionaries had gone. And he saw his friends with pots and machetes and knives. Where's mine? Where's mine? He got angry. And he literally chased them down. And he speared the first missionary he came to and killed him. And the rest of the Iowa were like, well, if we kill one, we got to kill them all. Because if we don't, they'll go out and tell what we did, and then they'll come kill. We got to kill them all. They killed them all. 4 years went by before anybody from the outside world knew what happened to them. After they didn't come out for about a month, they went up in there looking for them, and they couldn't find them. The missionaries that went for them couldn't find them. And they looked and looked and looked. 4 years before those wives ever found out what happened to their husbands. I've read this story so many times. There's a book about it. And I've thought, why didn't these ladies leave and go home? Because, that's what you would think would happen. It was in the newspapers, missionaries were missing. It was big news in the United States. That's one of the wives. That's Bob Dye's wife. Her name was Jean Dye. Believe it or not, she was one of our teachers. She was really pretty old, but she taught my wife and I translation principles in our missionary training. She wrote a book called God Planted 5 Seeds. She thought of her husband as a seed that God planted in the ground. Why didn't she go home, I thought. She said, I'm not going home. I came here to reach these people too. It wasn't just my husband. I came too. 4 years later, an Iota woman came out of the jungle. She's the first Iota person to ever come out of the jungle seeking peace instead of war. And the town, sheriff or whatever, immediately called the missionary lady. One of those Iota came out of the jungle. Get over here. She came over. She made friends with that lady. She invited her into her home. She took her in. She learned her language. She broke her language down into writing. She started to translate the Bible into her language. It took a long time. Eventually, the Iota men came out. They were sick of war, too. They didn't want to kill and die anymore either. The very men, get this, the very men who killed her husband came out. She met them. After she learned the language, she found out what they did to her husband and who did it and why. And she shared the gospel with those guys. And guess where they are today? They're in heaven today. They're Christians. They finally came out, and the missionaries learned the language and started to share the gospel with them, and the Iota church was born, and that's what it looks like today. That's an Iota right there. Those are guys who were the warrior killers. Now, those are probably the sons of those guys. Whoops, let's go back one more. Yeah, those are all Iota. Look at those. Those guys are you guys' age. That's what they look like today. Many Iota churches today, many groups of believers throughout that whole people group, because those guys went, and I ask you this question in closing. Do you think it was worth it? You don't have to answer that out loud. In fact, I don't want you to. Don't say yes, don't say no. Just think about it. Was it worth it? I think Cecil was the oldest. He was in his mid-40s. The rest of them, I don't even think, were 40 years old. They went to the mission field. They got killed before they ever got to share the gospel with anybody. They died before they died before they got to the silver part of the tape. They died before they had $500,000 in their 401k. Wonder, was it worth it? I don't know what you think. But I have this imagination that if I could ask him right there, right now, if we could somehow go up to the entrance of heaven and knock on the door, which I know we can't, knock, 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 knock. Whoever answers, let's say, hey, we're down at Jam. We're talking about Bob and Cecil and George and those guys that were killed by the IRA. We got a question for Cecil. Can somebody go get him? Hold on, I'll go get him. Goes and gets Cecil. Cecil comes out. You can't go in yet because you're not dead, and he can't come out yet because he is dead. Okay, it's weird. I know, it's just my imagination. But he says, hey, so what do you want? Well, I'll do the talking, okay? I'll do the talking. I'll say, Cecil, we're talking about you guys down there at Jam. And our question for you is, was it worth it? Would you do that again? You didn't even hit 45. You didn't share the gospel with anybody. In my imagination, Cecil would not say a word. Except this, he'd say, just wait right here just a second. Just wait here. And he'd disappear back into heaven. And 10 minutes later, he'd come back. And there'd be a whole bunch of people following. And who are all those people? They look kind of different. They look unique. Ooh. I don't know if you look like yourself up in heaven. I don't know. But let's imagine that they look like IOA people. And Cecil brings about 300 people with them, all the IOA who have died as believers since the missionaries learned the language and shared the gospel with them, and now they're all up in heaven with Cecil. And he'd say, that question you just asked me, ask them. Why don't you ask that question to them? So guys, was it worth it? Oh man, when you look at it that way, wait a minute. So a whole people group is going to be in heaven, part of the body of Christ, because those guys were willing to count their life as, this little part right here. That's nothing compared to that. I don't think they're crazy. I don't think that's crazy. I think that's just right. I think that's just smart. Now, I want to quit by saying this. I am not challenging you guys to grow up and go be martyrs. Okay? Go get killed for Jesus. That's not the point of my talk tonight. Really. It might seem like it, but it isn't. I promise you. I will tell you this. If every single one of you became a missionary to an unreached people group, the odds of any one of you ever being killed by the people you're trying to reach are somewhere between 0 and 0.1. Now, unless you go to ISIS and try to reach them, then all bets are off, okay? I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the 1,800 languages that are still waiting for the gospel. We know where they are. We know what kind of people they are. Most of them are very nonviolent, very normal. In fact, they live in towns often like the town that you live in, only in different countries. Right? It's not the way it was 75 years ago. You don't have to die to be a missionary. You might. You know what I say, though? Even if I do, so be it. Because I, for one, don't want to stand before the Lord and say, Lord, I lived my whole life for that little piece of silver tin right there. No, sir, I don't want to do that. I'm guessing you don't want to either, right? Probably wouldn't be here at Jam if you thought that way. Father, thank you for our time together again. Thank you for the example of people like these 5 who have gone before us. We didn't ever get to meet any of these guys, and yet here we are 75 years later talking about the impact that they have made on so many people's lives. I pray, Lord, that you will use everybody in this room to some degree to build your kingdom, to build your church, to draw in people from every people group around the world to be part of the body of Christ, the bride that's going to be presented to Jesus. Lord, I pray that nobody in this room would miss out on the great privilege it is of serving you. Give them a good night's rest tonight and another good day as they finish up here and travel home tomorrow. In Jesus' name, amen.